Welcome to another episode of the Sports Sentiment. I am your host, Nick Urias, and we are back once again talking college basketball. It's conference tournament week, folks, which means it's always an exciting time for all of us college hoops junkies. I'm most certainly excited. I'm going to be heading out to Vegas next week for the Mountain West tournament. But man, you get day basketball, you get a bunch of just fun, hoops scenarios across the board. You get a team like Gardner Webb out of the Big South that's won 3 games all year, and they're over here pulling off upsets, playing for their lives, and seniors ultimately going to graduate. You just can't replicate scenarios and moments that we're gonna get from now to the next 10 days. And we got the perfect guy to just talk all things college basketball, because this is one of the few guys in our business that just doesn't get an off season. He's talking, he's working on the off season for most of us, manufacturing schedules. He's traveling to games. He's watching games. And at this time of year, I mean, he's updating his bracketology to the minute. So you can find him on the Field of 68, does a mid-major show over there, bracketeer.org. Rocco Miller, thanks for coming on, my man. Good to be having you on the podcast once again. I'm trying to think, when's the last time we chatted? Maybe it was like early on during the non-conference, or actually we had you on around December timeframe. So good to have you on again.
Always good to be with you, Nick. Thanks for having me back. I must have done something right the first time. I know I was on. I'm just kidding. I know I was on last year too, but you did a great job summarizing all that. Sometimes I don't even consider all those things, but there's so much that goes on in a day in college basketball. It's frustrating sometimes because I feel like I still miss stuff because there's 31 conferences and all levels play into the overall picture at some degree. I get how the power conferences have a lot of the control in the way the shape is, the sport is shaped, the way teams are selected, the opportunities for teams to be selected, and also, of course, television coverage and all that other good stuff. But there is so many jewels to be found elsewhere. I was fortunate to be here in San Francisco back when, Todd Golden was an assistant and was neighbors with Todd. And then, of course, got to be a part of the program a little bit when he was coaching there for a few years, took them to their first at-large bid in 40 years for the Dons 2022. And, of course, the very next morning gets announced as the new Florida coach after they lose a overtime heartbreaker that basically brought a little bit of tears to my eyes, honestly. Loved Murray State too, so I wasn't angry at Murray State advance. It was just the surreal moment of seeing San Francisco back in the tournament and, as a 10 seed, not like some fluky WCC bid stealer. And that was a special team. They had special players, Jamari Bouye and Khalil Shabazz and all those guys, Masalski. But him go on and do what he did at Florida. Now he's the national championship coach. Might go back-to-back this year. I was able to, through that first year of him being at Florida, find this guy named Dusty May at Florida Atlantic and go to some of their games before anybody was talking about them. Sure enough, they go to the Final Four now. This Michigan team's pretty good that he coaches.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, it's just fun. And I'm just telling those stories right off the bat because you have to be able to connect those dots to what's coming in the future. And so we now have this other crop of amazing coaches happening, whether it's the Atlantic 10 level or with Josh Schertz or like even way below in the low Division I league. So there's never a dull moment. There's always exciting games, and there's always a lot of strategy within schemes and how games are coached, how players behave, if they're connected, if they're not connected. All those patterns are the same. It's just the players are clearly just a little bit more talented at the top.
Absolutely. No, well, extremely well said there, because it's amazing how, one team looks good one year and then, who hits the portal, who doesn't, who returns, who graduates. Next year, it's a completely new team, and then the culture's bad. And, the coach may be the scapegoat for that, but everyone has to work their way up. I mean, I'm in the midst of doing it right now.
Yeah.
I'm starting from ground zero right now, and I'm working my way up. You looked at a guy like Jeremy Schulman, who we've talked on this podcast before. Like that guy started at a junior college in Florida, and now he's gonna go fight for the OVC championship with UT Martin. So
Yeah.
there's always a story out there somewhere. That's what makes the sport so fun. And look, these conference tournaments, man, I mean, they've already started. I mean, the carnage, I think, will really begin probably, this weekend and during the early stages of next week. And I'm just kind of curious before we get into that, just kind of I know you're refreshing your bracketology and your bubble every single week. I mean, we got a couple of teams out here on the West Coast in particular, with Cal, Stanford, and Santa Clara right here on our neck of the woods that are kind of just fighting for, just an at-large right now. What do you make of those teams? I know Santa Clara is having a historic season. You and I have both caught a couple of games in person at the Levy Center. What's going on with the Broncos right now? Because they have the quarterfinal automatic bid to the quarterfinal. And if I were to take a guess, they're probably going to get the winner of Loyola Marymount or Seattle, and they'll play Pacific. And Pacific's having a good year themselves. So what's the scenario for Santa Clara? Obviously, they're going to be watching everybody else, but do they have to obviously win that first game and then maybe, lose by a possession versus like a St. Mary's or somebody in the next round?
Yeah, well, good question. I think Pacific or Seattle, probably the most likely. LMU and San Diego alike have played pretty bad basketball down the stretch. Amazing to see LMU fall all the way to the 10 seed.
I couldn't believe that.
You're right. But I mean, there's some issues going on there, I believe. So I would expect Pacific or Seattle, which is interesting because those are the two teams I would have said before seeing the final bracket. If anybody's going to break through and make a surprise in this tournament, it's one of those two. We've seen Seattle on numerous occasions. Well, first of all, they beat two power schools. They beat Washington. They beat Stanford. But second of all, they led deep into the game against Gonzaga in the kennel. Probably should have won the game, lost in overtime. That was back in January. But just recently, they had St. Mary's on the ropes too in a game at Climate Pledge Arena. Morauskas fouled out with 6 minutes to go. Will Heimbrot's the defensive player of the year in the league, just announced yesterday. So they have some pieces there. They battled through injuries. Maldonado's been in and out of the lineup, their guard. So I'm curious about Seattle. Pacific's extremely well coached by Dave Smart, the Hall of Famer from Canada, now in year two. Been able to build an offense around Elias Rolfe. They're getting good play from TJ as well, who transferred from Fullerton. And they are playing very organized and connected basketball, which is dangerous. And it's dangerous in March. This is a possession-by-possession sport, especially in the postseason. It's a TV segment to TV segment sport as well. We get 10 segments a game, and you can't let your team slip off in any segment. And Pacific's very disciplined that way, and Seattle has been. So I think Santa Clara will have a little bit of a test on Sunday night. They've been able to handle both those teams during the season. I think to your larger question, that's the most impressive part about the Broncos' body of work this year, to me, is you take the 9 teams below third place in the WCC, and Santa Clara went 14-0. That's actually really hard to do, especially if you know Santa Clara's history with year in and year out, always having one slip up out of nowhere. Last year they lose to Pepperdine in the tournament. Pepperdine went on that crazy run to the semis. That didn't happen this year in the league. It did happen when I was on the broadcast in Santa Cruz when they lost to Loyola, but they got that out of the way early and somehow, rallied around it and started playing much more consistently. This is their deepest team they've had, Nick. I think you and I have talked about that when we've seen each other. And that win over St. Mary's matters a little bit because it demonstrates they can beat a team inside the cut line. They also won on the road at Xavier during non-conference. Not like a super sexy win this year, but it was a top 100 road win against a power school. I think that helps. The road wins at Pacific, Washington State, and San Francisco this year. They're all quad 2-level wins. That gives them at least some data for the bubble that is better than some of the teams they're compared to. And right now, they're about the 4th or 5th team inside the cut line for me. So they've got a tiny bit of cushion. Of course, that could go away quickly. As I look at the overall bubble, just to give you a glimpse real quick, there's teams outside looking in right now with massive games on Saturday. And I think these are the games to really track closely. First of all, SMU has actually fallen below. They have fallen below Santa Clara. And so they might be like the last team in right now. Horrible week in the Bay Area last week, losing to Cal and Stanford, losing again at home last night to a good Miami team. It's not like a terrible loss, but they just keep falling behind. They never got a really good win on the road. Their best road win is Wake Forest. And SMU finishes at Florida State. Florida State's playing so much better lately. Florida State has a chance, I think, to get to 500 in the league, and it's at Florida State. So a good chance SMU falls again. Keep your eye on that. But I think the bigger ones are you start with Auburn. Auburn right now, they're in a win and they're in situation when they play at Alabama, their rival. If they do not win that game, they will take a 15th loss this year, which means if they lose again in the SEC tournament, which is all that matters because that's for the at-large, they wouldn't be an at-large team if they win the SEC tournament. No team with 16 losses has ever got in. I'm going to presume the NCAA is not willing to break such a golden rule, and Auburn will remain out. That will certainly help Santa Clara if Alabama just takes care of business this weekend. That's a massive one because if Auburn wins, not only is it going to probably get them in, but it's going to be a road win at Alabama to go with their road win at Florida. And anyway, their seed would probably land really high, like a 9 or a 10, instead of being in the area that Santa Clara is currently in. Virginia Tech goes to Virginia. So Virginia Tech's one of the first couple teams out, but a win over Virginia is very heavy, and that would give them a sweep over the rivals, Cavaliers. And Virginia Tech would probably leap easily into the field and give Santa Clara some problems in that event. So you need to root for Virginia. You have Indiana playing Ohio State. Ohio State's played their way into a safer level. You would probably just prefer Ohio State to keep winning at this point and keep Indiana out of the field. That will be a big game as well. Then you have like a very it's an extreme case, but if it happens, it's going to be a problem. If Arizona State goes to Iowa State and wins at Hilton, they're going to get really interesting all of a sudden because they've beaten Kansas, they've beaten Texas Tech, they beat Santa Clara this year, right? So that could be you don't want Arizona State in the conversation at all. So that's a game to watch. And then, of course, the big national one that I think is really gaining steam is Cincinnati. The way they've played down the stretch has been phenomenal. If they go to TCU and win on the last day, they're going to creep a little closer, and then they'll be talked about all during championship week. If TCU can just handle Cincinnati, I think that conversation goes away pretty quickly.
Yeah, so is there a scenario where both Cincinnati and TCU get in based on the fact
Probably.
that because I was going to say TCU has some of the most craziest wins and some of the most silliest losses in the resume.
Right, and the problem now is they've got the big win at Texas Tech they just earned a couple nights ago. And with that in hand and with the consistency down the stretch, they've played themselves well above Santa Clara. So they've got some room to drop now and Cincinnati's played their way up into the net. So Cincinnati's a top 50 net game now. So it's not going to really appear as a bad loss for TCU by any means. So it's kind of an imperfect storm for the Frogs that they're going to land in, which might make Santa Clara fans a little more worried because now I just gave you like 5 or 6 games that could really impact Santa Clara without Santa Clara ever stepping on the court because they don't play till Sunday.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy.
So there's a lot to track on Saturday. Long answer short there.
We got a heavy Mountain West audience that regularly follows the show. What's the latest deal with New Mexico after the Colorado State loss last night? It's a little bit loaded there because they're at Utah State on Saturday, and that can flip some things. But I'm pretty sure that the regular season, a share of the regular season title might be out the window. But I mean, speaking of that Santa Clara team, they just smashed them by 25 in non-conference, at the pit. So they've been kind of fizzling out, but I guess, reciprocating with some good wins the last week for San Diego State. What's the deal with the Lobos?
Yeah, the key for the Lobos is they get to play at Utah State, and not many teams have won at the Summit. I think just UNLV has, which is kind of funny. And UNLV, of course, swept the Aggies and won both games by double digits. But for New Mexico, it's a quad one opportunity against a tournament level team. Utah State's the only tournament level team left in the league. In terms of when I use that term, it means inside the bubble where they're going to be in the NCAA tournament. And so it's a massive opportunity. They can undo the loss to Colorado State last night and make up for it and then some, because I think when you look at a tool like the wins above bubble tool, this morning's update had New Mexico at and I don't want to get in the weeds on the numbers, but the very basic accumulation part of the WAB tool is if you're at 0, you're basically supposed to be right at the cut line. If you're in positive numbers, you should be a tournament team in theory. And if you're below 0, you're in trouble and you're probably not going. And right now, New Mexico's rating, they're the first team in negative numbers at negative 0.09. So if they get a win, it's probably going to be worth around 0.7. That'll put them clearly above 0. They'll be back in that SMU, California, Auburn type range of the tool, which at least, it doesn't mean you're in or out. It just means you're going to be firmly in the conversation. I think this loss to Utah State, if they lose to Utah State, would put them pretty clearly behind where they need to be, and they'll probably need to go win the Mountain West tournament, which probably means we're only getting a maximum of 2 bids in the league. We might be down to that at this point anyway, because Utah State's playing so poorly. The wins against them right now are not worth as much as they were a couple weeks ago. And so that's just kind of where it stands. New Mexico still has a path to an at-large because of that last game, but I don't think they'll get an at-large if they lose in Logan.
Before we move on to the conference tournaments that I'm going to throw at you, how heavily utilizes the wins above bubble metric used in the selection process on the selection Sunday?
Well, all we know so far is last year was the first year that the NCAA put their own stamp on the WAB, and they have their own little twist on it. I won't get in the weeds on that. But last year, the top 40 teams all got selected. So top 40 all got in. And again, they're actually giving them a metric to it. There's a decimal point system. So everybody's graded on a curve. But like I'm looking at it right now, and you'll see, Utah State's listed as 36 and TCU's listed as 35, but they're both 2.14. So they're actually tied at 35. I think it's important to look at the decimals because there's some teams that are like Ohio State, NC State, Texas A&M, Texas, and Santa Clara are all within like a fraction of each other. But after Santa Clara, there's a massive drop-off, almost a full point till the next team, which is VCU, which is the difference between 43 and 44. So I think some of that's important because once you're a full point above 0 within the decimal system, you're basically showing you're showing that the way the tool's designed, an average bubble team, if they played your schedule, you'd be 1 win above schedule from what an average bubble team would do, which means you should be firmly in my book. And right now, Santa Clara is still sitting at 1.5, which makes me still feel pretty confident about where they stand now. Now, obviously, whatever happens next week will go into account because the committee doesn't vote till a week from yesterday, which will be Wednesday of next week. But that's pretty much what we know. The top 40 got in last year, and then no team higher than number 49 got selected last year, and that was Xavier. And right now, number 49 would still be possible. Like we have Virginia Tech at 49. They're 0.37, but they're 2 spots ahead of New Mexico. In fact, they've got it right now to where the top 50 are all above 0. New Mexico's the first team below 0. And number 50 is USC. And obviously, we think USC's out today.
Yeah,
played terribly, and they lost their best player, so they're definitely not as big of a concern anymore. But just to give you an idea of how the tool's structured and works, I get nervous about talking about too much because I truly believe in the committee approach, which is why we'll do the mock committee this weekend starting tonight. Check it out on YouTube. Because it's a nuanced discussion. Like you have so many data points to compare, so many results to look at and compare. Like Nick, you did a great job bringing up the New Mexico blowout of Santa Clara. Like all those things factor into a team's season and a team's story. It shouldn't come down to like decimal points or these different metrics. If everybody's in the same ballpark, let's just get rid of the numbers and have a true conversation of who deserved it, not who the best team is. Because if it's the best team, you're just going to go off Ken Palmer or whatever. That's not going to work. You got to go after who really earned the spot. Getting in the NCAA tournament is precious. and it needs to be done ethically.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And the reason why I just mentioned the wins above bubble metric, because you just hear it popping up so much more and more now. I mean, I'm watching the game on the CBS Sports Network, and they're showing numbers with all of their graphics on the team's resume. It's crazy now how that thing just has popped up. And
yeah, the NCAA is pushing it. David Warlock, he's been awesome over the years. I love you, David, if you're watching this. But he's done a great job making it very clear that this is a very important tool to the committee. The NCAA has put their stamp on it, like I said. And once networks got a hold of that, and of course CBS is the main network for March Madness, of course they're going to cooperate.
Absolutely. As far as some conference tournaments are concerned, I've got a couple that I want to throw at you. I'll attach some of the brackets that are finalized. But since we were kind of on the topic of the Mountain West, we don't have the bracket just yet. But this league, I mean, I've been following it all year. I know you have as well. I've been coming on doing podcasts, just not only breaking down San Jose State's wins and losses, but just kind of the big picture games and, resetting the standings every single week. And now I don't really know what to make of it because, like you mentioned, Utah State's kind of fallen off a little bit. They're still a good team, but they've fallen off. New Mexico, ever since they played San Jose State in San Jose, their defense hasn't been up to par. Colorado State's the hottest team in the league right now. Just like last year, they've won 8 in a row and had an undefeated February. I like the Grand Canyon team a lot. Like, that's a team that I feel like that will have fans at the Mountain West tournament with the student section and are capable with Bryce Drew of potentially winning 4 in 4 days. Yeah. The UNLV team is so reckless, and I hear people on Twitter saying, hey, UNLV could be a potential bid stealer. But would anyone be shocked if they drew San Jose State on day one and they lost, or they could blow up the bracket? That's the thing I've said about UNLV. What do you make at the Mountain West? We don't have the bracket just yet, but just based on current form right now, who do you like?
Well, yeah, first of all, you got to start with Colorado State. They're the hottest team in the league, ripped off 8 in a row at this point. I thought February set up very well for them. Like, of the 7 wins they had during the month, I think 6 of them were against the bottom of the league. And I think that was really good for them because nothing against Air Force San Jose, those two specifically, or Fresno. But it does give a team that's got some talent like Colorado State has a chance to gain some confidence, get some rest and recovery going, play a few more guys, try a few more combinations, do some experimenting. A lot of different conferences, you can't do that. And when you get a stretch of schedule like they got in February, they were able to find themselves a little bit. Their offense is phenomenal. Ali Farouk-Manesh in his first year, really just carrying forward the Nico Medved philosophy to pace and space and finding open shooters and movement without the ball. They're running a beautiful offense. And right now I'm looking at basically the last 6 weeks of data. They're 12th in the country in offensive efficiency. They're number 2 in 2-point percentage. Obviously shooting it great from 3, which probably won't last forever. Not something you can really count on long term, but they've been over 40% in that stretch and top 30 in the country. They've been firing a high rate of threes as well. 47% of their possessions ends in a 3-point attempt. That's a heavy amount, but they're also getting to the line. So they're mixing in enough attacking the basket, basically a no mid-range offense. And right now they're getting to the foul line at a 55% clip in these last 8 performances, which is crazy because that's the third highest free throw rate in the nation, let alone the Mountain West. So they're doing all these amazing offensive things, but that always concerns me when it's heavy on one side because all it takes is one great game plan to get them out uncomfortable, slow down their rhythm, take their top 2 or 3 options away. A great game planner like a Leon Rice or a Brian Dutcher, those two, of course, the legends of the league, come to mind as teams that could maybe make Colorado State, make it painful for Colorado State. So we'll see how it plays out. But right now they've been able to figure all that out. Their defense is still average at best. And so they're going to have to really tighten that up if they're going to cut down the nets in Vegas. But they're the team to start with. Grand Canyon, I like that call. Grand Canyon's actually the team playing the best defense in the league of late. And I like the fact that Nana Owusu Anane. He is like an elite rim protector.
Oh, yeah.
The Turkish freshman is like ridiculous.
Yep.
And there's still, I think they're still trying to figure out how to best utilize him. But man, Ife Demirel is his name, of course.
Yep.
But being able to mix and match those guys, obviously Nana is only 6'8", but he plays so much bigger. And have FA at 7'1". You have Dennis Evans comes in at 7'2". You have a front line at Grand Canyon that is really, really hard to contend with, that a lot of teams can't match up with in the league. And so really it comes down to execution with the guards. The last time out, Micaiah Williams had a nice game. Brian Moore played well. But there's games where, I've seen Brian Moore turn the ball over relentlessly, and they cannot have that in the Mountain West tournament.
Oh, no.
So I think those two are great calls. I think the other one that really pops is San Diego State, just because, and Boise, of course. I already hinted at that because I do think their ability to game plan and them being in a win or go home situation is going to be a little bit uncharted waters lately for them over the last 5 or 6 years of history. And so I think those teams will come extremely focused with they have high expectations of themselves, and it doesn't matter what the outside world predicts or thinks. When you're in those environments, in those locker rooms, those guys are going to expect to cut down nets as well. So, and I think they'll lock in defensively. I'm a little concerned about some of the San Diego State performances, like the one in Boise the other night. They were not themselves that night. Magoon Gwath's been a little inconsistent, very inconsistent actually. And so they got to figure that piece out. But I do think Boise's a really, really big threat in this tournament.
Yeah. I don't know what to make of this. The GCU one absolutely pops just because I have seen that defense travel on the road. And I'll say it right now. You said it. Nana Owusu Anane is probably like the most underrated player in the league just because he's not a stats guy, but he does everything well. Like, he doesn't really have necessarily like a weakness within his game, and he's a defensive stopper on like forwards, which is going to be deadly in this tournament, especially on short turnarounds. So I can't wait for it. I'll be out there next week. I threw into two of your favorite tournaments that you threw at me last year. So I'm going to throw them at you on the screen here.
Here we go.
Arch Madness, the Missouri Valley.
The best.
Absolutely. This has been a conference that's been all over the place this year. Belmont's been probably the most consistent team on the road. They're the 1 seed. Bradley's got the pedigree. Illinois State was the flashy preseason mid-major. Murray State, I feel, is built like an NBA team the way they can go. UIC has just been a giant killer. I think they've beat every single team up top. And then you got everybody on the left side of the bracket. Drake, obviously, they got, the coaching staff from with Ben McCollum's gone and all the players are gone. So that's why you see Drake as like a 9 and you're like, whoa.
Yeah,
but
right.
Northern Iowa's dangerous as well with Ben Jacobson. He's kind of like the Leon Rice or the Brian Dutcher of this conference, right? So what do you make of this?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. Well, first of all, Drake, Eric Henderson came over from South Dakota State to take over the Drake job. He was amazing at South Dakota State. In my opinion, missed on a few portal experiments, and they just are not defending at all at Drake, and that's a problem. Clearly, they've lost their last 5 in a row coming into the Arch Madness, which is very unfamiliar territory, as you said so eloquently, Nick. And SIU is their first opponent, and SIU is the one team that's playing incredible defense lately. SIU was able to get some big wins down the stretch as well. They were locked into the 8 seed already, but that didn't matter. They played some of their best basketball in the last 2 weeks, and I fully expect SIU to get through today. Based on that, they beat Drake on the road by 5 during that stretch. The big win was when they won at Northern Iowa. The other team we'll talk about here in a second. And I just love the way they're defending. They've held in their 4-game win streak. Nobody scored more than 67, and that's only because Evansville put up a bunch of threes during garbage time when SIU was up big. And the reason I'm going into depth on SIU is because we know what's coming on Friday, Nick. if the Salukis get through, we've got a real clash in styles between the beautiful offense and rhythm of Belmont basketball against the rough and rugged defense of SIU. Be a very exciting noon West Coast time tip-off to start our Friday if we can get SIU Belmont. So I'm kind of hoping for that. Nothing against Drake. I've supported Drake forever. Hopefully there's no hard feelings there. But I think we get just a really nice noon delight if we can see Belmont SIU. But otherwise, larger picture, Northern Iowa, they're a good pick to win the whole thing, even though they're having to play the extra game today. They had Tristan Smith out for a good chunk of the conference season. And Tristan Smith's a big part of what makes Northern Iowa's offense go, and he's a great defender. So him missing the 8 games really threw this team into a tailspin. They went 2-6 during that time, really cost them the bye during that stretch, taking losses that they probably otherwise wouldn't have lost. And he's still being limited on minutes. He played 22 minutes against Drake in the finale, scored 12 points. But his presence helps a lot. He gets a lot of steals as well. He had 4 steals against Southern Illinois, even though they lost that game. Trey Campbell's an all-conference player. Leon Bond's an elite shooter. Ben Schweiger's a great leader. This team has a ton of camaraderie. They're just not very big. That was the big thing when they came out to Moraga. I covered their game against St. Mary's. They should have won. Northern Iowa should have won, but they couldn't get a darn rebound. I think St. Mary's almost over doubled their rebound output, and Northern Iowa still only lost by 4 at the very end, or by 5, I guess it was. But keep your eye on the Panthers. They are very much talented enough to run through the tournament. But there's other great stories as well. Bradley's played pretty well down the stretch to lock up that 2 seed. Jaquan Johnson, I think, is going to be named Player of the Year, if he didn't already this morning. And so anytime you have the Player of the Year and he's only a sophomore, you definitely have a fighting chance. Brian Wardle as a head coach, he's won Arch Madness twice, and so him and Ben Jacobson are the only guys who know from experience how to get through Arch Madness and cut down the nets. So I think that's a little bit of an edge because there's a strategy to winning 3 games in a row, or at least 3 games in a row. Ben has to win 4. UIC is like the Houston of the league. They're fun to watch because they bully people at the rim, and they've got a really electric guard that transferred from BYU. A lot of people didn't talk about him at all during the portal, but that's Elijah Crawford. He missed the first 10 games of the year, which is why UIC started 0-4 in conference play, but they finished really strong. I think they beat everybody except for Belmont in the league at least once, and they swept Bradley. So this team is really legit. Crawford was a guy at BYU that was just stuck on the bench and made that natural transfer to the next level below, and he's really thrived here at UIC, getting multiple game MVPs. He's the number 1 assist guy in the conference. So I got my eye on UIC. Murray State's got the most talent. That's who UIC will play on Friday. And Murray State is probably 6 or 7 high major players, but they don't defend for a lick. Worst defense in the conference. It's really holding them back. I wanted to bring them up because if Murray State can find their way this week, they're like the one team that can win an NCAA tournament game because of their talent. Their talent ceiling is so high. They just really got to figure out this defensive piece. Can they do it finally this week? That's the big question for Murray State.
All right. Good stuff from Rocco Miller there. Yeah, Arch Madness is always fun. I love it. We get that championship game on the Sunday. And, man, the championship game always absolutely delivers. Whether it was Drake last year, I'm blanking on who they played, but I remember Indiana State lost to Drake 2 years ago, and that was the heartbreaker. Of course, for the Sycamores with Robbie Avila when Schertz was still with Indiana State. Let me throw one of my favorites, Starch Madness. This is the one that always gets a little wonky. This bracket last year did go chalk though. Montana was 1, Northern Colorado was 2, and they both met in the championship game. And I remember watching the championship in Vegas last year. There was just so much offense. I couldn't believe it. I was like, Montana dropped 65 in the first half, and they're kind of hanging on here. This bracket is always nuts. I remember Eastern Washington was like a 1 seed 2 or 3 years ago and got picked off in the first round by like Northern Arizona.
Yep,
So
correct.
like this is always nuts. Portland State's been a great story with Jace Coburn this year leading the charge. But Northern Colorado's been hot as of late. I think they've won like 7 of 9 or something along those lines. Montana State with Coach Logie's always pretty good. Sac State was good at home, but terrible on the road. I mean, what do you make of this thing? Because I saw the Portland State, despite them being the 1 seed in this tournament, is like 3rd or 4th on the odds board to win the tournament.
Right. It's crazy. Their offense has gone into a cave down the stretch. They finished 3-4. They had 4 different chances to clinch the league, and it took all the way till the final night to finally clinch the league. It was kind of like, in baseball sometimes when somebody's got a magic number of 1 and then they choke like 4 nights in a row and they don't clinch it.
Yeah.
That's kind of like how it went for Portland State. They finally got it done, though, against Weber State on the last night. Congratulations to the Vikings. It was an incredible start to the year for them. They had multiple overtime wins. They were just pulling out every close game, and some of that maybe a little bit. If you're in the luck world, they would say some of the luck caught up to them a little bit. But that's what the Big Sky Tournament is this year. I think you're going to need some luck to win it, regardless. I think the big story lately has been Eastern Washington. Their 8-0 February was unbelievable, because I think they were 5-17 before that, and they got just red hot from 3 for most of the month. That was a big part of it, but they've been tight all year long with their losing. Like, you go all the way back to opening night, they had UCLA in a game. Yeah, it was like tied with 3 minutes to go. Yeah. They were up at LMU. They basically blew the LMU game at the foul line and lost in overtime. They should have won that one. They had a bunch of others. They took Colorado from the Big 12 to overtime.
That's right. Yeah.
And they played Nevada really close as well. And so this team has been right there on the cusp and playing their best ball when it matters most. So they'll be fun, really, really fun to watch. But we were reminded with some cold water on the final day of the season what is possible if shots are not falling, because Eastern Washington got surprisingly beat at home against local rival Idaho, 85-81 in their senior day. So there's certainly not a dominant team by any means. We got excited about the run, but now we just don't know what to make of them. They should be a lot of fun to watch. I think the team that that really needs to break through as a program that hasn't still is Northern Colorado. They're coming in as the 5 seed, but they're the second hottest team in the league. They really, really finished strong. They're them and Portland State are the only teams defending close to a top 100 level nationally. And, the Northern Colorado system under Coach Smiley has produced, of course, most famously Dalton Connect, but they also had St. Thomas come through there. He has a lot of great players come through there and eventually get opportunities later. This year, he was able to keep guys like Quinn Denker, Brock Wisney, and Zach Block. Those are their big 3, and they're all seniors. And 2 of them were bench players last year, but they played a ton. So they built the team around those 3 this year, and they've finally gotten some of the younger role players to accept those roles in a better, more effective way. And down the stretch, they were 1-7 at one point. They finished 9-1 to finish Big Sky play, including beating Montana by nearly 30 on the last game of the year.
Yeah.
And that's who they open up with on, I believe it's Monday. So Northern Colorado, I think, is going to be my pick. And as for Steve Smiley, with all the great work he's done in Greeley over the years, it's a lifetime achievement award for him to finally get to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I'm with you there on Northern Colorado. Actually, this is the one. I really liked the Montana team last year, so I totally envisioned them going to the championship. But man, the way Portland State has kind of, not played good the last 2 weeks with how hot Northern Colorado, I would be shocked if you just get the 2 hottest teams with the Northern Colorado and Eastern Washington, the championship, and it just turns into like a barn burner. So
that would be great.
That would be. I'd be very excited.
I should mention Money Williams, of course, is still at Montana.
Yes, and still really good player.
He can go off at any point, but he can also be a little bit detrimental on his off nights. So just keep that in mind as you watch the Grizz. And, of course, the Grizz open with Northern Colorado, so that will clearly be the game to watch next Monday.
Yeah, I saw Money Williams as a freshman. He came into San Jose and he just totally passed the eye test. Kudos to him. He's been at Montana his whole career. He's still only a junior.
Still only a junior. Seems like he's been around for 10 years.
I know. We got to hit, of course, the CAA, another crazy conference. I love I've always had a soft spot for Wilmington over the years. Just because, for what they do and their depth, I feel like I watched our game versus Charleston the other night, and as good as their big man is, and he's been a big part of what they've done this year, I was like, man, he missed the free throw and then ended up being costly at the very end of the game because they ended up hitting a 3 and they only lost by 1. Regardless, the CAA, remember, I think, who was it? Delaware last year that made the crazy run as like an 11 seed. Might have been last year or 2 years ago, Rocco, where Delaware came storming all the way to the championship game and won like 5. They were on like their 5th game in 5 days or something like that. The Delaware Blue Hens are in CUSA now, but regardless, we've had some crazy stuff over the years with the tournament.
Good memory on that. Delaware was like phenomenal last year. 12 seed to the title game.
Yeah. See, I remember it was last year.
Yes.
Wilmington's the 1 seed. You got obviously Charleston, who has some really good guards. Jalen Counter, the Middle Tennessee State transfer, is really good for this team. Hofstra's been pretty consistent. I can't believe the fall off of Towson this year as a 7. I was pretty shocked with Pat Scary's bunch. Stony Brook could potentially be a sleeper, I feel like, and William and Mary, that's a fun team. Shoots a bunch of threes and makes a lot of them. What do you like here in the CAA? Because I think William and Mary could be a wild card in this thing.
Oh, absolutely. Well, William and Mary is the team that swept UNC Wilmington. So they've got their number, but unfortunately they're on opposite sides of the bracket. So the only way we see that again is if it's in the title game. But yeah, William and Mary is a team I got to spend a week with in Jacksonville for their tournament. I was on the call for that, and they played lights out when I saw them. They had injuries at that time, and they were still able to, handle UTEP and destroy Abilene Christian. Those are the 2 games I saw them. But they play super connected basketball. They've actually taken a lesser percentage of threes this year. They're open to taking easy 2s instead of 3s, but they obviously do not use any shot clock. That's the most exciting part. Yeah. Number 1 in the nation in average possession length, firing shots up in 13 seconds or less, basically. So it's a Brian Earl coach system. Of course, Dan Earl from Chattanooga's brother, and it's one of the most fun offenses to watch. But they've ran into trouble in league play because the league is deep this year, and they've lost some heartbreakers. Losing to Elon twice by 3 points. They lost to Hampton by 3, lost to Campbell by 1. So their ability to close out close games is concerning, especially lately. But I think in general, like they should have been higher than a 6 seed. They were red hot in non-conference, and they got a week now to find that spark before the lights are back on, coming up against Elon again, the team they lost to twice. That's their opener, so that'll be interesting. But I do think Wilmington's built to get back to the NCAA tournament. If you remember last year's NCAA first round, they had Texas Tech really, really scared late in that game, and eventually Texas Tech won it in the last couple minutes. But they brought back a good core from that team. The big man you mentioned is Patrick Wessler. He came from Virginia Tech, so he's a Power 5 center. Obviously, just shoots 58% from the foul line. So good idea to foul him if you're playing Wilmington. But otherwise, he presents a lot of problems. I think one of the keys to explaining Wilmington and Towson is Christian May. Christian May was one of Towson's top 3 players last year and their most connected leader guy in the huddle. And Wilmington goes and gets him in the portal, convinces him to leave Towson. And that's really helped Wilmington succeed this year as well. They've got so much experience when you factor in Wessler being an older player, Christian May being very old, and the seniors they brought back with Greedy Williams, Nolan Hodge, Noah Ross, etc. Madison Durr is another in-conference transfer they took from Stony Brook. So Wilmington's really kind of taken the league by storm in the portal. and on the court. It's been a little bit of a monopoly for the Seahawks. But I do think in the tournament, like Charleston's got confidence now that they got that win at the end of the year. They've had to deal with all the Hickman drama in court.
Yeah.
They have him back eligible for the second time. It's absolutely insane. And the real wild card of the tournament got into the 4 seed, which is really important because that gives them just as many buys as the top 3 teams, and that would be the Monmouth Hawks. And the big story there is Kavion McLean, who was a Texas Southern player last year. He ends up getting caught up in the gambling probe for Texas Southern and was held out the entire season. And when they put that news release out about the arrests and the schools involved and all that stuff, Kavion's name was cleared. Could have been eligible all year, but he comes out starting February 5th against Stony Brook. He's only played 8 games. He's been the MVP per KenPom in 2 of them. He's had 3 games over 20 points. He was basically the best player in the SWAC last year. Now suddenly injected into Monmouth's team, and Monmouth played well enough without him to be in position to make this move and get to 11-7. Jason Rivera Torres is on this team. If San Francisco Dons fans remember him on the Dons last year. And so Monmouth's the real wild card. They did get a crack at Wilmington and Charleston. Those are their only 2 losses since McLean joined the team, but they were both on the road. Now they get to play them in DC. Could be a little different on a neutral court when they get their chance if they can get that far.
Here we just rattled off 3 wild cards, which means anything could happen in this one. So
absolutely, yeah. William & Mary is going to be live against anybody.
Yeah,
I think that Stony Brook has one great player in Eric Pratt, but he got suspended for spitting on a fan last week. So there's chaos and stories all over the league. We could do a whole show on the league for sure.
One more on the way out. Just because I do like the upside of the team that now the Summit League historically is just one of these leagues that is all offense and no defense, really.
Yes.
I really like the potential. North Dakota State with Dave Richmond's been the most consistent team all year. St. Thomas is eligible this year, and they're just one of these run and gun 3-point teams. But I like a Denver Pioneers team with Coach Bergstrasser, who came over from the Division II level. Yep. Very reminiscent of a Cal Poly team from last year.
Very, yes.
And I think similar to what Cal Poly did last year in the Big West, Denver could potentially do it here when they start playing. I will ask you this, Rocco, who do you have? And with that, can you see this team? Can you see the Summit League champion potentially being probably going to be around like a 14 seed, I imagine, maybe higher. I'm not sure. I'd like to get your thoughts there. Can they pull off a first round upset? Because I do think, especially North Dakota State and St. Thomas, have the potential upside to do so.
I would agree. There's upside there. I think St. Thomas has the most upside, just the way the style in which they play. They gave Washington State a scare earlier this year. They ended up losing by 10 late, but it was a good game throughout. Didn't get a lot of other samples. They didn't play well at St. Mary's on opening night. That was so long ago. But Nolan Minisale, he's become their go-to guy. He's still only a sophomore. But Carter Bajurki is also just a massive load in the paint at this level, 6'9", 260. And so Nick Jankowski is probably Janowski. He's like the freshman of the year in the league. This is a coach in Johnny Tower that's not afraid to play freshmen. You probably remember a few years ago, Andrew Rohde, who's now at Wisconsin, played for Virginia last year, started with this program. It's such a fun place to play in terms of how effective they are running offense, passing the ball, playing mistake-free basketball. Now they don't even go for offensive rebounds. They're basically a version of the Liberty Flames playing in the Summit League. That's my best comp. But they've won a lot of basketball games. They have a great home court advantage. Unfortunately, and the great variable of this tournament every year is the fact that it's played in Sioux Falls, where both South Dakota teams have a massive advantage in terms of that environment. It's not a very big place. The crowd gets very loud when those two teams are playing. And St. Thomas has to open with South Dakota State tonight.
Yeah.
So
it's tough.
It's tough. They were able to beat them both times during the season. This will be a little different at the conference tournament. Curious to see how that goes. But on paper, St. Thomas definitely the better team. As for North Dakota State, I like the consistency. You said that perfectly in terms of I'm impressed. They were able to get through the majority of the conference season without slip-ups. They did lose to Denver at home, which speaks to your other great point about Denver being the most dangerous team in the league. I agree with that. But overall, to go 14-2 is pretty good in the Summit, especially they weren't even picked near the top. I think they were picked fourth. So it's a really overachieving team throughout the season. The one thing I'll just say for tonight's game is even though Oral Roberts has a horrible record, they finally started figuring some things out late. They blew out Denver last Thursday. And I know 3 of their wins are all Kansas City wins, so those don't really count because Kansas City mailed it in about a month ago. Yeah. But I'm just really intrigued by Oral Roberts. You know, some of their defensive numbers have improved the last few weeks. They're clearly clicking offensively. I think this could be a really interesting 1-8 matchup today. So I'm not even putting North Dakota State in pen for the semifinals yet. Certainly in pencil. And then lastly, that Denver matchup with North Dakota. I think that's a really good matchup for Denver. North Dakota has similar problems to Denver in terms of never being able to figure out how to defend anything. They're both awful defensively, but I can make a case that Denver's offense is better than North Dakota's. So I think they're in great shape to advance at least to the semis. And then no matter what, we're happy to welcome the Pioneers to the WCC next year.
Yeah, was it Trayson Eaglestaff took this tournament over last year with the Fighting Hawks.
Lost in the finals, I think.
Yeah, lost in the finals. Denver's got a really good point guard with Carson Johnson, who came with the coach from the Division II level. And then I know some San Jose State fans might be watching this. Garrett Anderson, who was on the team 2 years ago, is a starter on that North Dakota Fighting Hawks team. So, you know, people could go all over the place, and, you know, they ultimately
gotta 5 minutes
and they find themselves a home. I mean, right. find a way to impact. Rocco, you and I can talk all day here. I can't wait for the Mountain West tournament next week. I know you got yourself a pretty hefty travel schedule yourself. I know you and I are, you know, just big West Coast hoop fans. Can't wait for the Big West tourney. That bracket's not finalized yet, but that should be a good one. Anything you want to say on the way out here, Rocco? Put on anybody with your with your bracketology site and anywhere they can find you.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Bracketeer.org is the foundation for all of the bracket work and non-conference scheduling. So stick with us throughout the spring and summer. Lots of information about the Mountain West and all 31 leagues comes through there in terms of putting games together throughout the off season. Obviously, here in these next 12 days or whatever, however many we have left, I guess it's only 10. 10 days we have left. Bracket updates will be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, at least, maybe daily next week, actually. And we appreciate everybody's support. I have now 4 or 5 writers nationwide. We got a couple guys going to the Big East tournament. I have a guy at the NEC tournament last night, covered the Wagner upset of Central Connecticut. That was great. Pete Janney did a great job there. And so, you know, we appreciate everybody's support. If you love our work, please support however you can. We have a support button there to keep us going. And that's the main thing of what I own and operate. But I'm also part of the Field of 68 network. We'll have a show Thursday. Well, by the time you see this, it'll probably be over. But we're doing a conference tournament preview for a 2-hour special. So this was a good warm up for that, Nick. Thank you. And then, of course, the bracket show is called Fielding the 68, Mondays and Fridays. I will be on tomorrow, Friday, at 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, and also the following Friday. And I should also add Selection Sunday. Jeff Goodman and I will be on reacting live to the selection show. So if you want something to listen to, some instant reaction while you have the show on your TV, it's kind of a fun way to do it. We give us our authentic reactions during the show. This will be like our 4th year in a row doing that. So thanks again for tuning into all that. And then Basketball Review is the website I do special features for. So throughout the season, did Teams of the Week awards. That was a lot of fun to track all 31 leagues that way. But also, I'll do special interviews in there. I'm going to be interviewing some conference commissioners throughout the spring and the summer. So college basketball is 365 days a year when you're following me. So appreciate all the support.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll never forget you and Jeff Goodman's North Carolina getting in last year. You guys' reaction. That was
it went kind of big, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, rightfully so. I mean, nobody had him in. Regardless of all that, Rocco, thanks again for coming on to talk hoops with me once again. Hopefully we could catch up down the road, before you head off to the Final Four in Indianapolis. So if we don't talk then, thank you very much. And that will do it for this episode of the Sports Sentiment. Once again, I am your host, Nick Urias, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast.